Welcome to Enhanced Impact. In today's lesson, we're covering mastering virtual environments. It's a step-by-step guide to creating and managing environments for Python development. Different applications and projects will often need different packages and even different versions of Python. So creating virtual environments is a way to separate workspaces to prevent conflicts between the different applications packages. There are three methods for creating virtual environments. We can use venv, virtualenv, and Conda env. If you are very sure about what Python packages and versions work well together, and so you don't need to manage those dependencies, you need a lightweight tool. So this is something simple that you can use. Virtualenv or venv, that's where they excel, they shine there. Today, however, we're going to work with Conda because Conda allows us to not have to worry about managing the dependencies beyond Python packages, and that's what Conda excels at, is the dependency management. And so that was why we're going to use it today. It's a cross-platform solution, and it's great for working on data science and scientific computing projects. In today's lesson, we're going to cover if Conda is installed. We'll check to see if it's installed. We're going to list any Conda environments that we already have created. We'll create a virtual environment, activate the environment, use that virtual environment inside a Jupyter notebook, use the virtual environment in Visual Studio Code, export the environment to a YAML file so it can be used for anyone else that's working with your application that you're working on and need the same dependencies for that application or configuration. So that's what we'll do for that. And we'll clone the environment using that YAML file. We'll then deactivate an environment and delete an environment. And whenever we delete an environment, we have to be very careful because this action is irreversible. So along with that, what's left behind when we do create environments within Jupyter Notebook, we'll be creating a kernel so that we can use our environment, and we'll have to delete that kernel if we no longer want it once we delete the environment. And also, even though we don't have to create anything extra to be able to use an environment within Visual Studio Code will automatically create an interpreter that we'll have to delete if you no longer want the virtual environment or that interpreter. So those are things to keep in mind. And again, be careful whenever you're doing any deletes because the actions are irreversible. And so without further ado, let's go ahead and begin. Here we are at the command prompt. Here I just use CMD. You could use the Anaconda prompt if you want to. Here I have Anaconda as well, but I like CMD. I'm on Windows. And so let's take our first action of checking for our Conda environment. So to check to see if we have Conda located on our machine, we just sit in and type Conda --version. So we have --version. Here's the version that I'm working with, is 23.11. If you don't see this, that means your Conda is not installed. So you can go and I encourage you to go to Google, search for Anaconda, install Anaconda, and then you'll have access. Or you can install Mini Conda if you don't want everything that comes with Anaconda. You need something that's a little bit more lightweight. To check out where your Conda is installed in your machine, you can just type where Conda. Here I have it Conda installed in 2 folders. And to check to see if we have any environments that have been created for using Conda, we go Conda env list to list our environments. And here I have 2 environments, dashboard st, which was for a stringlet dashboard, and your base environment that comes when you install Anaconda. Now let's go ahead and create an environment. So let's call it Conda create --name, and I'm going to create a Flask app environment. So I'll call it Flask _app _env, and with that environment I want to install Python 3.8 and Flask, and that's great. So you can just install things at the start of the creation of your environment. That's very useful. If you forget and you need to install a package later, make sure we tell them yes, then you could just do that with Conda install and just the name of the package or whatever you're trying to install. So now that we've created the environment, what you have is options to activate the environment, And they tell you, hey, this is how you activate it. You see Conda activate, the name of the environment, and you can tell that your environment has been activated because it shows up in parentheses in front of your path. So that's how we create an environment. Conda stopped automatically setting environments up as a Jupyter kernels. So in order to use this as a Jupyter notebook, you need to manually add kernels for each environment. And so this is what we're going to do now. Now that the environment has been activated, we're going to do Conda install IPY kernel for this environment. I'll tell them yes. Install everything there. Okay, so now we want to type in Python -m IPY kernel install --user --name, and the name of your environment here is our Flask _app _env, and the name that you want to display when you select the kernel in the Jupyter notebook. They tell us display name. We're going to call it Python space Flask _app _env close parentheses and in quotation marks. Alright, it tells you install the kernel. This is where our kernels are located on our computer. Is C users FROL app data roaming. So that's a great place for the kernels. If you want to see what other kernels are listed, you can also just kind of list your kernels. But let's first start off with opening up a Jupyter notebook and seeing if we can use this. So you can open your Jupyter notebook right here from the computer command line, just typing in Jupyter notebook. But then you kind of lose this this element here. So what I'm going to do is just go directly to Jupyter notebook. Here, it's already installed on my computer. I'm going to open it up, and here I'll open up a workspace, or you can create a new workspace. Let's create a new workspace, and here you can select your kernel. Alright, so we select our kernel. Once we select the kernel, we can check to make sure that we actually are in the environment that we created. So to do that, we do import sys print sys.executable, and here it shows you that the environment that you're using is for the Flask app env that you just created. As another way to check and prove that you actually have access to the configurations and the packages that you created for the environment, you can import one of the packages, and the package that we had was Flask, and so we can import that. We don't have any issues. Then you know that we are right on target with the environment creation and using the kernel to activate or use that particular environment within the Jupyter notebook. Now, what's great about Visual Studio Code is that we don't have to create anything additionally other than creating an environment in order for us to be able to use the environments, the workspace packages. And so we do Control-Shift-P to open the command palette, type Python, select interpreter, and here this is how we can access that virtual environment. By clicking on it, it's already in the interpreter list, and so I click it. This is the same code that we had before. I created this Python script previously, and it's the same information. Hey, let's run it and see if you say there's no problem. It tells us that this is the environment, Anaconda 3 environments Flask app. So that's the environment we're in. And when we go in to run the cell to import Flask, you get a check mark, it's a thumbs up, everything is okay. And so here we can clear all and do it, run it one more time so you can see it. There it is, it's perfectly in there. So those two things. So that part is done. So one of the benefits for when creating applications is often not done in a silo. You tend to work on teams and working with other people, and so someone else may actually need to use your environment. And a way that we can share environments and the configuration so that perhaps you can work on an application at the same time with another person or in parallel what we can do is essentially export that environment out to a YAML file. And so let's do that now. So we're going to go to Conda, and what we'll do here is take our Conda env, export -- name. The name of our environment is flask _app _env, and we go -- file, and we'll call it, let's call it cloned environment. Let's say cloned _environment. Okay, so cloned environment, and from here .yml to signify this is a YAML file. Okay, and so that's what we have. To check to see if you actually have this cloned environment, we can just list the files that we have within that directory, and there you go, it shows up here as cloned environment. Right. So it's cloned environment. Now that we have that, we will clear the screen. And so what we may like to do after we've cloned an environment, we may decide to create a new environment. So before I do that, I'm going to deactivate this Flask app environment because it's still active here. So to deactivate, we just say Conda deactivate, and so now we have that. And so we want to use our environment to create a new environment based off of the YAML file that we created. And so we do that by saying Conda create, Conda env create -- name, and let's call it flask _app _env2. And we're going to use our cloned environment YAML file to create this new environment. Press enter, and it starts the process of collecting the packages and installing it to this new environment name. Alright, so hey, do you want to activate the environment? We're not so concerned about activating the environment, but I do want to show you how this shows up within Visual Studio Code. So it's Control-Shift Palette again, and we look for our interpreters. We refresh our list. That's the way to refresh the list. And we should have our Flask app _env, and we have Flask app _env2. So whenever you create an environment, unlike Jupyter Notebook, you don't have to create a kernel for it, as I mentioned before, is that it will automatically show up in an interpreter. So let's say you have these now and you don't need both of them, or you don't want any of them. We now are going to the business of actually deleting environments and deleting the kernels. To remove the environment, you just say Conda env remove, and it removes the name -- name, and the environment that we want to remove is flask _app _env. We can remove that. Okay, so remove all packages in the environment. Okay, before doing any deleting of the kernels, we want to take a list of what kernels we have available to remove from the Jupyter Notebook. So we have Flask app. That's what we want to remove right now. So let's go in, just check to see if that kernel is still relevant or within the Jupyter Notebook. So here, so we have a new notebook, and see if we can select that kernel. Even though we deleted that environment, the kernel is still available for use, and we want to remove that. So we can remove it by coming in here and saying remove rm directory, which is folder /s, which is all associated files for that particular folder, and Q for quiet, so just a minimum number of writing on the screen related to that. And this is part of the folder, and we're going to have a \, and we're going to go Flask app _app _env, and there you go. And so we can check again, just list those kernels and say, oh, it's no longer there. So we come down to the Jupyter notebook, and let's see if we can refresh it. Refresh and see what happens there. So select the kernels, and now you see that the kernel is gone. Okay, so that's how we remove it. So we go to Visual Studio Code, and what we see inside of Visual Studio Code, when we go to Control Shift P for the command palette and select Interpreter, our Flask app is often, I guess it's not here. I thought it would be, but it's not. So here it's gone. So if I refresh, let's see, refresh our screen, refresh it, and see. Okay, so it is gone. All right. So if you did have one, if you wanted to remove it from Visual Studio Code, you could, and you can do that by just doing the same command, but for where your app data is located. You might be Anaconda 3. So if you have it in Anaconda 3 environments or wherever yours is located, just know what directory you're located in, and you can use the same code, remove directory //s for all company files located before that particular folder that you're trying to remove. Quiet so that it's not a bunch of writing on the screen when the deletion is occurring, and just make sure that you're very careful about what path you're using. And so yeah, that's essentially how we do that. All right, so thank you for watching the video today. I hope that you learned some things. If you did and you liked the video and would like to see more like them, definitely give me a thumbs up, subscribe, and until next time, be well.